But every person I've ever introduced had a LinkedIn page. So, I've never introduced someone to like the secret hermit who lives on the mountain who takes a password to reach them. Every person I've ever introduced wants to meet people. It's just, there's 8 billion people in the world.
Look into his eyes. They're the eyes of a man obsessed by
success.
Eyes that mock our sacred institutions. Bedroom eyes, they call them in a bygone day.
Sex desire is the most powerful of human desires. When driven by this desire, men develop keenness of imagination, courage, willpower, persistence, and creative ability unknown to them at other times. So strong and impelling is the desire for sexual contact that men freely run the risk of life and reputation to indulge in. When harnessed and redirected along other lines, this motivating force maintains all of its attributes of keenness of imagination, courage, etc., which may be used as powerful creative forces in literature, art, or in any other profession or calling, including, of course, the accumulation of riches. Napoleon Hill.
Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedelec, and I'm super glad that you're here with us today because I am here with my most amazing hot guest, Michael Whitehouse. Michael, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am super excited.
Excellent. Give us a 5,000-foot view of who you are and what you love to do.
Well, 5,000 feet, I'm very small. But the bigger, I like connecting people. I'm good at two things: making connections and expressing, which broadly includes like writing and speaking and making a nuisance of myself. And once I figured out that I'm good at those two things and much better at those things than everything else, I started focusing on mostly doing those two things. And that's when I started like making money and having a business. So the whole guy who knows a guy concept is built around my network and concierge business, where people hire me to make introductions for them. And then I express through a few different podcasts. One of the newest of which is the Neurodiversity Superpowers podcast, where I celebrate people who are successful because of and not in spite of their non-standard and customized brains. Wait, customized, that sounds like cyberpunk. But they're non-standard brains. And so I do that. And of
How
course,
do you customize your brain?
Well, not so much customized, more just non-standard configuration.
There you go.
Yeah.
Very big words for somebody whose elementary school teachers thought you would never amount to anything.
Yeah, that's why I got out of elementary school. I went to first grade,
Bastards.
had a miserable experience, and my parents pulled me out of there and put me in a private school called Sudbury Valley, which has no grades and no structured curriculum. And basically the kids find their own educational path, and it was amazing for 4 years.
Wow. How'd you do? I mean, obviously well, but
it seemed to go pretty well. Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting is you think about the educational system. You got the tests and the structure and the grades and the system, permanent records. And Sudbury Valley it's a school that the entire building's a library. So it's a library throughout every room in the building. It's an old mansion that was converted into a school. There's a bunch of staff members who
they went to Hogwarts.
Kind of, who each have different special, some have science background, some have history background. So if there's a class you want to take, you find the staff member who knows that thing, and you arrange for a class to be taught. And then they put it out there, and anyone else interested takes that class too. I probably took all of 4 classes in 4 years. But I came out of 4 years, what would have been 2nd to 5th grade. And at first we were thinking, oh no, I didn't do the academics, maybe I'm behind. When they did the actual test to see where I'd land academically. So after 5th grade usually comes 6th. They said academically you could jump to 8th, but socially you'll probably be in trouble if at your age you go to 8th grade. So we're going to put you in 6th with your grade cohort for social reasons. But so left to my own devices, I learned faster than public school would have taught, because I was allowed to bounce off the walls on my own, which is funny because I don't often think that far back. It's hard to remember before the pandemic. But when I think all the way back there, it's
let me get this straight. Kindergarten, grade 1, grade 8, pandemic business.
Yeah.
So you're what, 10?
I sometimes say I feel like I need like like a Ouija board to remember anything before 2020, because that was, I did like a past life regression therapist to remember 2019, because my life is so different from then. But it was really a stroke of luck that my parents happened to know about that school. I happened to live near it and have that opportunity. But yeah, I think if I'd been stuck in the regular public school environment, as I was in the 80s with that very, desks and rows kind of mindset, I either would have been expelled or ended up in jail, or who knows what would have happened. It probably wouldn't have gone well. So Sudbury Valley, while I don't think about it much, is definitely pretty crucial in the formation of who turned out to be me.
Well, and I always find it fascinating because I think if I was left to my own demise, we all know what happened after school. So it's probably best that I was contained for at least 5 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
But I was always going, hey, what about this? And how does that work? And they're like, oh, you'll learn that next year. You'll learn that in university. You'll learn that. I never did learn. And I was like, this sucks.
It sounds like one of those, like, go ask your mother. Go ask your father.
There's a lot of that.
Yep. Yeah. But that's, yeah. And the thing is with Sudbury Valley, so their whole thing is, find your own path. There's no concept of age at Sudbury Valley officially. So, 5-year-olds are taking classes with 14-year-olds. And now they do tend to cohort together, 6-year-olds and 12-year-olds don't have a lot to talk about generally. But in terms of like taking a class, they're all together, which means most kids will rise to the level of maturity you put them in. So 7, 8, 9-year-olds, if they want to take a history class and it's mostly teenagers, they're going to try to adapt into that environment. If you think back to history, there were like 9-year-olds who ended up taking out the family when their parents died and someone had to run the farm. So they did. 9-year-old kid becomes the man of the house and he's running the farm. So like we've infantilized children. And by children, I mean people under 25 in our culture. But, Sudbury Valley is great for that. And then, of course, I went back into public school and I've got this idea of I have autonomy and thought and they're like, do this, do that. And I'm like, but that doesn't make any sense. And they're like, why are you talking? Why? I told you what to do and you're still talking. Why is your mouth moving when you should be doing what we tell you? So there was a little bit of an adjustment period coming out of Sudbury Valley into public school. But unfortunately, the high school I went to after 3 years of adjusting was a pretty decent high school. And I did well enough.
How come you went back to public?
Parents ran out of money.
Oh, that happens.
Yeah, because public school is free and Sudbury Valley is not free.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's hilarious. Because I also remember I had 4 older siblings, like 6, 7, 9, and 10 years older than me. And my brother brought home a geometry test one day. So I would have been in like grade 3. He would have been in grade 9, whatever it was. And I got 70% on it. Sight unseen.
Yep.
And he was looking at me like, you're such a bad child. This is easy. You want to be in high school.
It's possible skills like that you might amount to something.
Yeah, I might have, but
you might, yeah.
No, they kept telling me I'll learn that later, and I never did. So I just,
yeah, and it's interesting. So you made me walk down interesting memory paths. Because I think so. After I went to college, I went to UMass Amherst, and then after that, I graduated and basically didn't have the attention span to get a job. Because the job search process, you got to find a job and you got to fill out all these things and fill out the application and write the thing, and I'm like, this is stupid. I could just start a business, right? That's pretty easy, starting a business. And I was fortunate, privileged, I think is the word, that I had a family that had money to invest in me, and I was apparently had the gift of expression back then too, because I convinced them to invest $40,000 in me, and I opened a game store, knowing really nothing about business. I thought I knew something, but I really, in retrospect, knew like
running a business is easier than doing applications.
Apparently, with a business, like you're supposed to make more money than you spend. That's a key part of it. And if you're not, like you should be urgently trying to do so. And I learned that when I was like 32. Unfortunately, I started the business when I was 22. And so it was called Phoenix Games. It was wildly successful, except for not making any money. It was a community space. it was a game store. People hung out there and it was important to them, which meant that 2 or 3 years in, when it was clear it wasn't going to make money, I couldn't just say this business isn't working and walk away, because it was like really important to a lot of people. What I ended up doing was 3 years in, it got to the point where I needed to pay my bills. I had no income, which meant I had to go get a job, which means I couldn't spend 77 hours a week in a store. And I called a community meeting and I said, hey guys, so good news and bad news. The store makes enough money to pay its own expenses, breaks even, can't pay me. I need to go work, which means the only way this place can possibly stay open is if all of you are willing to pitch in for free. You'll never be paid. This will never be profitable. If you're willing to pitch in for free to run a store. And I was quite sure how this is going to go. They're going to be like, well, you did it your best, Michael. Thanks so much. Good luck with your next endeavor. And I was very surprised when their answer was, in fact, okay, what do you need us to do? And I was like, I'm sorry, what? I had no plan for if they said yes. I was assuming it would be a no. I was trying to give myself the easy way out. I didn't have any bylaws in place. I didn't have a structure in place. So suddenly a whole bunch of gamers had the opportunity to take over a game store they weren't financially invested in. That went exactly as well as you'd expect. Because they've been watching me for 3 years, all of them thinking they could do it better. And then with no bylaws to determine like who was in charge and how things were supposed to run. Technically I had veto over everything, but every time I exercised it, people were like, what? But we're doing all the work. Who are you? But we did 3 years later, did turn it into an actual nonprofit that ran for 10 more years.
Wow.
Entirely volunteer run. So I can't say it totally failed. It just never like paid my bills. And that taught me a whole bunch of wrong lessons. Like I shouldn't be too aggressive. I shouldn't assert myself too much because I'll lose my friends. And that entrepreneurship is a dangerous path and I should go the safe path of getting a job. So I spent 10 years being broke and going from miserable job to miserable job and trying sales and being really bad at it because I'd learned lesson not being too aggressive. So like I learned to not be too aggressive / assertive and then went to sales. That worked awesome. That was great. But then came the pandemic and it blew up the last job I was doing. It's technically a 1099, so technically a business, but really a job because I was following someone else's system. And I decided if I'm going to start over, I'm going to do it my way. And there is a path for me. I'm going to figure it out. I don't know how long it's going to take. I was inspired by, down here in the States, we got PPP money, the payroll protection program. And if you had a business operating in 2019, I think it was, then you could get 2.5 months of whatever your payroll was. And if you're a sole proprietor, anything you made counts as payroll. And the restriction was you had to use it for payroll, which meant I had to give it to myself. Greatest restriction ever. Like I couldn't buy anything with it. I could only put it in my pocket. I could take it out of my pocket and put it back in the business, but I had to put it in my pocket first. So enriched with that, I said, all right, let's give this a shot. Figure out what I'm going to do. Tried coaching. It kind of worked, except I didn't actually know enough yet. And but spent 2021 driving Uber and DoorDash to pay my bills until I finally figured out that I could get paid for making introductions. Because that's when I made the realization that I mentioned earlier. Getting back, so you actually remember how I started. Getting back to the beginning, that I'm really good at two things, making connections and expression. That I kept meeting with people. Like I should have been building a course or I should have been building a website, but I couldn't because my calendar was full of one-to-ones. And I kept saying, well, I need to buckle down. I need to be more serious. I need to block out more time on my calendar, stop having fun meeting people. And, these are pretty cool people to meet. But yeah, stop having fun meeting people and do the real serious work of a business. And finally, I had a conversation with Phil Palucha, who's the host of Billionaires and Boxers. And he said, Michael, some people get paid to make introductions. And I was like, wait, what? I could keep meeting people all day and get paid for it? That's like finding out some people get paid to drink beer.
Right.
And in fact, like I could probably more consistently meet people all day than drink beer all day. So that's even better than finding out people get paid to drink beer.
And there are people that get paid to drink beer, by the way.
They do, but I feel like that there's a limit on how long you can do that. Or
how much you can drink in a given day.
Right. Yeah. Like there's no limit to how much I could totally just do one-to-ones all day long and would love it.
But you bring up a fantastic point, and I think it's a foray, whether we happenstanced into this or not, or if this was your plan, your evil plan the whole time was to convince me that this was a casual conversation. We were just organically having it. Yeah, and really it was a plot, but that's okay.
I assure you, I do not plot. That is well outside my zone of genius.
It's the whole idea or notion that when we're allowed to identify or express our genius without any pressure or constraint, it's like, just do whatever you want. Like, I don't care. Just do whatever you want. It's like, here's the park guidelines. You can ride whatever you want. You have a full pass to anything. Go and do what you love to do. And the majority of people aren't given that opportunity to be able to see until later in life that thing that is so easy for them, that it's like a water or a fish inhaling water kind of thing. We think we have to jump out and breathe air, and it's like, no. Just your body is built to take the water in, get the oxygen out, and just do you. Don't worry about what anybody else is doing, and that's your magic sauce. And it's so hard for people to find that because they're always being told you should do this, you have to do this, you don't fit in here, and I love it that you not only get paid to do those things that you're good at, you talk to people all day and disturb the waters, which is perfect.
Yeah. Well, and so one of the things that did hold me back earlier was I was starting to discover these things. I was meeting all these amazing entrepreneurs, successful people, learning all these things. And even when I was still driving Uber, I was living a pretty good life. I remember at one point thinking, if my business ever takes off, I just coach, I podcast and coach for free and make my living driving Uber, which Uber is driving around, meeting interesting people and listening to podcasts and music for $30 an hour. Like, that's not work.
It's the R&D.
Yeah, that's not in the same category as like being at McDonald's. That's not a job. That's a thing, and I get make money for that. Cool. So I realized if like that's where I am, like, okay, I could be stuck here 40 years. I'll be fine. I'd be okay with that outcome. And so I was starting to try to help my friends because I'm living a better life. I'm more comfortable, and they're still struggling. They're still making minimum wage. They're still wondering how they're going to pay their rent. They get a flat tire and they might lose their job. And like, they're all on the edge. I'm like, hey, I can help you. And they, one, didn't have any money. So even if I did have a program, they couldn't afford it. And two, I offered to help them for free and they wouldn't receive it because they weren't ready to receive that message. And also, I wasn't exactly, I wasn't like, look at me, how amazing my life is. I was working 7 days a week. I was driving Uber, which is not prestigious, although I had a pretty good life. I couldn't be like, look at me, I'm an Uber driver. My life's amazing. So once I finally turned away from that, because trying to help broke people is not a great business model. So I turned to working with people who have money, because clients who have money are often able to pay a lot more money than people who don't have money. Crazy how that works. And, the kind of clients who think in thousands, not like ones and tens, tends to create a lot more opportunity. And, with my business, it's based on the idea of one introduction to my clients. They could make $10, $20, $50,000 from one introduction, and I could make 5, 10, 15 a month. So pretty easy sell when I, talk to them about it. So once I got to that point, now that I have a 6-figure business, now when I go back and talk to my friends and I say, hey, here's how this works, more and more of them are like, wait, at first they are resistant. They're like, oh, yeah, I've tried that, whatever. And they're like, wait, sorry, I wasn't listening. Say again what you said about the opportunity. So I have a mission now because, we had the labor shortage, which is that a Canadian phenomenon too?
I don't know. I'm not in corporate.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. So in the US, people are talking all about the labor shortage.
Yep.
Everything from McDonald's up to corporate to everywhere. Nobody wants to work anymore because nobody wants to work for crappy wages in a crappy environment anymore because they're discovering entrepreneurship and gig work. So my mission is by the beginning of 2024 to have made the labor shortage 10 people worse. I want to help 10 people get out of their crappy jobs and into the place they're meant to be. And, to your point that you're making about how if you do the thing you're meant to do, stop trying to breathe air, you're a fish. I'm actually finding it relatively simple once I can convince people you can do the thing you're meant to do. And so, one of my friends who I've known for years, she's actually one of my first coaching clients, but she paid in trade rather than in money. She couldn't afford it. She is now a VA, and I've connected her to a number of different people, some of whom we know in common. And she is very close to be able to go full time at that and leave her retail job and do this. And this is something she's truly gifted at. She's an amazing editor. That's how I first discovered her skills. She edited my book in trade, and when she rewrote sections, they sounded better than what I wrote. So then I hired her to write the copy for my podcast episodes, and she's going to be doing more stuff like that. So I started making introductions for her, and boom, she's about to replace her income, and then of course entrepreneurship. But then I talk to other people and find out, once I get them out of the mindset of how can I make more at my job, which is a job they got into not because they like it, but because it's what they stumbled into, and instead to what do I want to do, and what is the water you breathe as a fish, what is the thing you're naturally inclined to, and now who has money to pay for it, and now how do I get them to give me their money? And that's that was it with Network Concierge. I make connections all day long. At this, I keep a running tally that goes back to the beginning of November, and I'm at 930 introductions I've made since November.
Nice.
So apparently that's a lot. I guess most people don't make, what would that be, 140 a month or something. I guess that's more than most people make.
I would think so. I don't think most people know that many people like to name. Like I may have 5,000 followers on Facebook, but I don't really have a clue who 4,000 of them actually are.
Yeah. Well, and of course, 900 connections. There's probably, I don't know, maybe 100 and something unique individuals in that 900 because I've made multiple introductions for individual people. But making connections. But I wasn't tracking it before, but I probably made not too many fewer in the 8 months prior to that before I was doing it as a business, because it's what I do. And then it's a matter of someone has money. Mm-hmm. Remember when I realized that the median income in the United States, or the GDP per capita, is $67,000 a year, which means if you're making less than $67,000 a year, somebody else has that money. So if you're making $37,000, there's $30,000 that is your share of the economy that's in someone else's pocket. So figure out who it is and figure out what makes them want to give it to you.
And they do want to give it to you. I used to know a guy whose job was to network like you do on an international scale. And he sold basically used drilling rigs. And it's just, that was his job. I mean, now I think you would just put it on, Craigslist or something.
There's still probably
not really sure how you get rid of those.
Because there's actually a huge challenge. I mean, you see it in the big data space. It's like you have all the information in the world. Now, what do you do with it? And we're seeing that with the internet. So so you have all the information in the world, but there's so much noise that there is still probably a place for someone who just specializes in making connections for used drilling rigs. In fact, when you said that, I'm like, I probably know 2 people who'd want to meet him if he's still doing that. To find the opportunities. Because even if you searched it, well, is this still? Is it legitimate? Because whenever you see a listing for something super high ticket, like, can you trust it? Right. Who is this person? Where are they coming from? What's their background? I recently met someone who I've nicknamed the guy who knows a bank, because he does what I do, but for financing. So anything from a mortgage to a hard money loan to personal financing, business financing, he just has a comprehensive Rolodex of financing sources for all kinds of financing, any kind of structure you might need. He's got someone for it. And then he can offer a commission for referrals. And thus he makes a network of networkers who find people who need money. And so now if I run across anyone who says, I need anything from a business loan to a mortgage to, and a lot of people, if you do a mortgage, you go to the local bank, you get a mortgage, but sometimes it's some other situation where you need your business credit to be taken into account or something funky. That's where he comes in to make the connection to that right financial institution, because I'm sure every partner he has a website and would be found on the internet if you know what you're looking for. But every person I've ever introduced had a LinkedIn page. So I've never introduced someone to like the secret hermit who lives on the mountain who takes a password to reach them. Every person I've ever introduced wants to meet people. It's just there's 8 billion people in the world.
You want to meet the right people.
You don't want to meet all of them.
Exactly.
Yeah, so there's a value in that, and also there's so many jobs that you just be like, that's a job, really?
Right.
Because there's so many things that need to be done. If you look at a corporate org chart, like you walk into an office and you see all the cubicles, you're like, what do all these people do? Because any complex process requires a lot of people to do all these different, someone needs to proofread the spreadsheets that go into the thing. Someone needs to, I don't even know what happens in corporate either, but
I've seen it once.
There's all these different little roles in there. And then you'll meet an entrepreneur and they'll say, oh yeah, I discovered what title insurance was, which is there's companies, all they do is they provide insurance against the possibility that the title of your property isn't actually clear. So even though you've done the research, you bought the house, but the person who sold it to you didn't actually fully own it, even though they thought they did. Because real estate deeds are just a series of transactions. Like there's not actually a big register of everyone who owns everything, even though you think there is.
I thought that was what registries did.
There may be, but that's actually a summary of a series of transactions.
Oh.
So that's the registry is generally the thing until someone's like, well, actually, I have this transaction from 1897 that says this, which means this person didn't own it, so this person didn't. So like there's this niche space in real estate of title insurance and title research to make sure that the registry is right. And extrapolate that across every industry and every state and every province and every town. There's a lot of places for people to fit in. And every home transaction is a $200 to $1 million transaction.
Right.
And if you can take 0.5% of those or 0.1% of a $200,000 transaction, you can make a few bucks.
There sounds like there's a blockchain opportunity in there somewhere.
There probably is.
So talk to me about you have a podcast with a big word in it.
Neurodiversity. I'm assuming you don't mean superpowers.
I can grapple that one.
I'm sure you know the word superpowers because it's clearly a concept you're familiar with.
So the neurodiversity unto it as a thing, what is the semantic definition of that?
So neurodiversity is a somewhat nebulous word that's expanded meaning over time. It used to mean just autism spectrum. Then it expanded to mean ADHD and autism. And then it, as I use it, it's anything that makes your brain such that you don't see the world the same as other people.
So I got to introduce you to a guy. You will love him.
Yeah, I've discovered a lot of people in the entrepreneurial space fit into this description. But so start with autism and ADHD to give you kind of a general concept, but then dyslexia, chronic depression, bipolar. One of the people I'll be interviewing has, I believe the term for it is chronic suicidal ideation or something like that. But he has a fascinating story because with chronic suicidal ideation or whatever the actual clinical name is, in his suicide is always on his mind. It's always a possibility. So the way he describes it is your car breaks down. What are your options? Well, for most people, it's, I don't know, get it fixed, get a new car, walk, take the bus. Well, he's always got, or kill yourself.
Run in front of a car.
Which sounds really morbid, but what it meant was when he hit a point in his life when he was in a terrible job, in the wrong marriage, as everything was wrong, but he was stuck there. Most people stay there because they're like, oh my God, what if I leave and I fail? His thought was, what if I leave and I fail? Kill myself. Or kill myself now. And he simply followed that. I don't know if you saw the movie Yes Man with John Kerry.
Yep.
Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey. Or John.
It kind of led him on that career trajectory because every time he had a huge decision to make, he'd be like, what's the worst that'll happen? So he took all these chances, and when you're willing to take chances, reasonable chances, good things tend to happen. So he ended up being a touring comedian. He ended up writing for some, national shows. He's done 7 TEDx talks. And it's all because he has a condition that most people would think would be debilitating. actually, once he,
Liberating.
managed to leverage it as a superpower. Now, I imagine it's probably not fun to have, if you were sitting there, but before you're born and God's like, all right, so what would you like yourself to be like? Oh, I'd like chronic suicidal ideation. People probably wouldn't choose it, but there's so many things like that, whether it's autism or ADHD or dyslexia or whatever, that there's a superpower component and a kryptonite component.
Right.
And if you can learn to minimize the kryptonite and maximize the superpower, you win. So, the one person I know has autism, has Asperger's. So what it is sometimes called high functioning autism.
I think Asperger and Tourette's are my favorite disorders.
Yeah.
Just saying.
But so with Asperger's, what the superpower part is, he can look at any business deal and immediately the solid deal or not, what can be tweaked. He can look at any situation and be like, there's $1 million right there. I'm gonna go take it. Anyone else walking by is like, you're looking at warehouses. What are you seeing? He's like, right there, $1 million. His kryptonite was he wasn't good at reading people or systems. So first time he made millions, he ran afoul of regulations and the government took all his money. Second time he made millions, his partner stole all his money because he didn't have a deal in place and didn't realize he was being lied to. Then he learned he had Asperger's, learned what his deficiencies were and how to compensate.
Yep.
Next time he made millions, he kept it.
Nice.
Because he learned how to maintain the superpower. And so the narrative on neurodiversity is very much around disability and struggle. And going back to what we were talking about school, teachers want everyone to fit in the square hole. So you got to be a square peg. If you're a round peg, well, we're going to file that down until you start getting a little more squarish. And so if you have ADHD and you're in school, or you have autism or Asperger's, which is the biggest way it manifests, is not being able to read social situations, and kids are freaking mean.
Right.
So you go through life thinking you're a loser, a failure. At best, if you're lucky, you might be able to get a mediocre office job. We aspire to get you to be able to work at Target or Walmart. And like, that's not success, that's less failing. And that's what you're told for 20 years is, maybe if we work really hard and we're lucky, we can overcome your challenges and you can live a normal life. Ugh.
Who the fuck wants a normal life? I mean,
that sounds terrible.
That sounds like a death sentence.
Because the narratives end at 20. They're like, and you graduated college, yay, we win. I'm like, okay, that's when the story starts. Like, college understand that, they call it commencement because it's when you're beginning your life. You're out of the prologue and now can actually start the story. So there's not enough stories sharing the success stories about why it's awesome. I say part of the mission with the Neurodiversity Superpowers podcast is that someone will listen to it and say, oh man, ADHD sounds awesome. I wish I had ADHD.
Right?
Why do I have to be neurotypical? That's not fair. I want autism. That sounds amazing. It would be a silly narrative if there weren't a counter narrative I was trying to counter. But I'm going to that extreme because the narrative is so much of disability. And in the corporate world, it's, the right thing and the good thing is to accommodate your neurodiverse employees, which the boss hears as, you should spend money for your broken team members so they can keep up with your normal team members. Instead, you've got Superman on your team. You shouldn't put him in the office with kryptonite walls.
Right.
If you put him in the office that didn't have kryptonite walls, he'd be Superman. But you're putting him in the kryptonite room. So he's can barely move.
I also saw a documentary once. It was a super short one. There's a guy in Calgary here who ran a company, and God, that's got to be like the 90s, I would think. And basically what he did was hire a whole bunch of people with kind of spectrum autism that were really good at a certain thing. So one might be really good at finding patterns. One was really good at doing accounting. One was and they just got him a job doing that thing. And they were faster, better than like teams of 6.
Yes.
So they got paid, by the workload that they got done, not by the hour.
Yep.
And they got the liberty of having, being in a room with nobody else in there and saying, don't knock on the door, don't slide
Mhm.
food and just gave them the environment that they needed so that they could do the magic that they did.
Yeah.
I got to find out who that was and connect him with you too.
Yeah, that'll be. Yeah, I know. I heard a story similar to that. And that's kind of that's some of that neurodiversity superpowers message for the corporate world. Is
Well, yeah.
This isn't about doing the right things, it's about making money. If you've
Come on,
got
people.
someone who's an autistic engineer, and
Yep.
engineering is their strength.
Yep.
But their weakness is they hate people. They hate people. People are exhausted. Not they hate people, but engaging with people is exhausting. But then your company, because you're all about engagement and team and generative thinking, so you got to go to the morning meeting so we can share our ideas, and then you got to go to the 1 o'clock meeting to check in and see how you're doing, and of course you got to come to the end of the day meeting too, and then you wonder why this guy is useless, because it takes him
Right.
2 hours to decompress from any social interaction, and you shove him in a meeting for 45 minutes 3 times a day, whereas if you took the meetings away and let him work, he's the guy who at 5 p.m. you'd leave and be like, Bob, you okay? He's like, yeah, I'm finishing this up. And you come in at 9 a.m. and Bob's sitting there at his computer still working. You're like, Bob, did you leave your chair? I guess not. No. Should I?
I don't know. What time is it?
Yeah. And he'd be perfectly happy to work all night. He'd probably never remember to ask for a raise because he's too busy working. And all you have to do is not make him do the crap he doesn't like. And
Well, isn't that true for everybody, really?
yeah.
I mean, I don't really understand most business organizations whereby they say, oh, I hired you to do this job. This is your job. Do this job.
Yep.
My first question is, what do you love to do?
Uh-huh.
It's like, I couldn't care less why you applied for this job. What do you absolutely love to do?
Yep.
And how do we take that and give you a position doing that thing?
Yep.
Because somebody who loves doing that is going to be way more effective at it than somebody that's good at it but hates it.
I actually, George Shepard, who runs 360 Summits, he's telling me that he gave his entire team skills inventories, or one of those assessments, a lot like, what are you great at? What do you love doing?
Yep.
He took the assessments, looked at what everyone was great at, looked at what everyone was doing. And there's a massive mismatch because, they got hired for, I need this, so we hire for this. He resorted his whole staff, like half the staff changed roles entirely, and the productivity went through the roof.
Nice.
Because you had people in totally wrong roles, and it seemed like they should be, and they could do them. They were getting them done, but it was a struggle. And it's funny for me as an entrepreneur because I've now gotten to the point where I basically don't do things I don't like doing. So I've had a couple times where I've gotten clients have taken me on to do something that was out of my zone of genius, and I'd be like, okay, all right, I can make myself do this, right? I couldn't. One of my clients, as part of the role, involved like calling a few hundred people, and I've done sales. I know how to pick up the phone and call hundreds of people, and I went to do it. I couldn't. Like, I would make 2 calls and be like, I can't. I ended up bringing in someone else. Found a friend of mine, be like, hey, you're good at calling people, right? You want? And basically
subcontracted your job.
I gave that person like a decent chunk of what I was going to get paid, because that was actually a key part of the role. I'm like, I just can't bring myself to do it. Like, I'm in such an entrepreneurial space, and so much saying I want to work in my zone of genius, that, and it worked out great because it was super simple work. Like, I was able to train her over Facebook Messenger and like, hey, here's what you need to say. Here's what we're trying to get out of them. Here's list numbers. Like, is that it? Like, that's it. That's all I need. Well, I just need a lot of it. She's like, oh, okay, cool. And a few days in, she's like, this is super fun. Do you know other people who need this work? So I'm going to be connecting her to other people who might need that work. But I'm now to the point where if it's something like that, I mean, I have a no pitch, no close sales strategy for my business. So with my networking concierge, I have not overcome a single objection. I have not asked a single obligating question. Now I explain it when I have the conversation. I say, this is what it is. And I often get the question, well, how much does that cost? And I tell them what it costs. And then they ask maybe other questions and I answer them. And then they might ask a question like, so how would I hire you? And I'd say this link, I'm going to put it in the chat. And if you would like to work with me, the fact that I put the link in the chat means I think that I'd like to work with you. If you'd like to work with me, you click on that link. There's a green button. You click on it, you put your credit card in, and we'll be working together. And that's the close.
Nice.
Is letting them do it, because I don't want to work with someone that I had to convince to work with me. If they don't see the value, I don't want to be reclosing them 3 weeks from now because they forgot the injection
and over and over again.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been a blast. We do have to stop at some time. I know it's crazy.
What?
But
What if stop?
I know,
Internet, there's plenty of room.
So how do people start their journey with you if they're like, oh my God, I don't know what the hell you do or why I want to do it, but I want to get a hold of you?
I don't know what the hell I do either. But they should go to guywhoknowsaguy.com. And on there, I have cleverly made a list of all the things I'm doing, although I need to update it again. But I've cleverly made a list of all the things I'm doing. And they can get a copy of my book, which tells my story from when I started as a real networker up to the beginning of the pandemic. And they can get it for free. So they can put their name and email right at the top there, and they'll get an email with the book. And if they then reply, send me the audiobook to that email, I'll send them the audiobook, and they can listen to my beautiful voice read my book to them, which I have been told is a very enjoyable experience.
By your wife. No,
She's actually has not listened to my audiobook, interestingly enough. But she's also super introverted and does not want to read a book about networking. She got me for that. She doesn't need to network. She's got
there
me.
you go. Exactly. She's gonna ask you, hey.
She made
And that's
one
how she
connection.
got on the
I
show
make the
too.
rest.
So she better get her butt on here because she's got some awesome stuff I want to make public. That is
Yes.
awesome. Michael, you have been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I know how valuable it is. Any last words for our peeps?
So I will share the advice, which is probably totally out of alignment with everything that we talked about. But since I do networking and teach it, if you know at least 10 people, you have a network and can be a connector. So don't let the excuse of I don't know enough people to be a connector stop you from connecting. Just decide I want to connect people and be a helpful person, and then start making introductions, and boom, you're a connector.
Nice. I love it. Awesome. This is Michelle Nedelec. Peeps, thank you for being here with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcaster app so that we can help you get it up and keep it up when you need me. We love being here for you. Thank you for listening to the Little Blue Pill for Business podcast with your mistress in business, Michelle Nedelec. Why are you still here? Go to littlebluepillforbusiness.com and get your goodies. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to share it with somebody else that you know would enjoy getting it up in business. After you subscribe to the podcast, of course, so you won't miss any future episodes. Now, check the notes for links. Oh, and only tell your wife if she's into this, entrepreneurship. And I'll see you both on the other side.